evening. Perth police have confirmed that arson is suspected in the fire which caused damage estimated at $250,000 to the La Tenda nightclub in Victoria Park early this morning. Steve Blake reports.
Firemen from 4 metropolitan stations managed to extinguish the blaze in just 50 minutes, but that was long enough for the building to be gutted. Apart from the structural damage, stock and equipment worth thousands of dollars was destroyed. At the height of the fire, the flames could be seen from kilometres away, and a thick pall of smoke hung over the theatre restaurant in Geddes Street, Victoria Park. One fireman was taken to hospital suffering from smoke inhalation, but he was soon able to resume work. Within hours of the blaze, police had revealed that there was evidence that the building had been broken into. Arson squad detectives were on the scene all day sifting through the debris. It's expected to be 2 days before their on-site work is completed. La Tenda was owned by the well-known Perth restaurateur Vince Todaro. Steve Blake, ABC News.
Criticism of Perth city buildings and roads prompted a strong defence today from architects and the Lord Mayor. As Loretta Murphy reports, they were quick to dismiss a Sydney architect's claim that Perth is becoming Australia's ugliest city.
It was the Perth of 18 years ago that Sydney architect Neville Grisman said he liked, before modern buildings and roads he said were becoming sewers of motor cars. The modern buildings, he said, were poorly designed and proportioned. They used nasty materials and they alienated people. His own work, including small buildings now the subject of an exhibition at Waite, has led to 4 of his buildings being listed among the country's top 20. Perth's Lord Mayor has spent 5 years heading the City Council's Town Planning Committee and said today there was no truth in Mr Grisman's claim that the city was crude, clumsy and badly designed. He said Perth roads compared well with those in eastern states and the architecture didn't alienate people.
No, but architects have to be careful that they don't do that, and they encourage people to use the buildings and the area around them, and certainly we've done that. I mean, there's no city in the world that you can travel 5 miles and just still be in gardens, albeit from Rivervale right through to the university.
One leading architect, Mr Jeff Summerhays, said at least the criticism made people think about what they wanted in their city. He didn't accept that Perth was ugly, but said people shouldn't get complacent. Partners in Cameron, Chisholm and Nicol, which designed Allendale Square and other high-rise buildings, refused to be drawn on the criticism, but the Royal Australian Institute of Architects said it was for the most part unrealistic. On occasion, it was inaccurate and unspecific. The Institute described Mr Grisman as a small practitioner in Sydney who has no particular experience in high-rise development except apparently that of an observer. Loretta Murphy reporting.
The Australian Petroleum Exploration Association wants Aboriginal land rights legislation in Victoria and South Australia to be based on West Australian principles. In Perth today, the Association Council decided to seek a meeting with the federal government to emphasise that under procedures being adopted by Western Australia, uniform legislation was unnecessary. The Council said the settlement of the land rights controversy was of major importance to the industry. The key elements of any land rights legislation must include continued Crown ownership of minerals, allocation of land to Aborigines on the basis of need rather than racial grounds, and compensation only for disturbance to land or effects on landowners. It should not relate to value of minerals, spiritual or religious factors. A state visit to London by President Mitterrand is seen as a sign of improving relations between Britain and France. The French leader's 4-day visit follows resolution of a long-running dispute over the EEC budget that soured relations between the 2 countries.
The start was mildly inauspicious. Air France delivered the Mitterrands to Gatwick Airport 18 minutes late, and the time was never quite made up. But the visit was otherwise unruffled, and an elaborate 48-hour security operation at Victoria Station made sure it stayed that way. The searchers carried out their final checks in the network of tunnels underneath Victoria not long before the presidential train pulled into Platform 2, where state visits have begun for a century now. The Queen's great-grandfather, Edward VII, played a significant part in setting up the Entente Cordiale with President Mitterrand's predecessor in 1904, and now, 80 years on, the anniversary was being celebrated in style. No one, presumably, pointed out to Monsieur Mitterrand that the guardsmen were wearing headgear copied from the French after the British had defeated them in battle. Over the centuries, honours in war have been just about even anyway. The state landau is older than the Entente by a couple of years, and the ceremonial is older still. though an unscheduled piece of maladroit horsemanship was rebuked by the Queen. Madame Mitterrand, who tends to dislike big formal occasions, seemed to enjoy this one. And the first state visit by a French president to London will indeed be almost all ceremonial. Scarcely any politics to disrupt the smooth flow. Later, in Westminster Abbey, the president, who escaped from a German prisoner of war camp and made his way to Britain to join the resistance, laid a wreath at the tomb of the unknown warrior. Nowadays, Germany is France's closest ally, but the president wants, while he's here, to strengthen the links with Britain too.
A helicopter has crashed in guerrilla-held territory in El Salvador, killing 4 senior military commanders and 10 other people. The Defense Ministry in the capital, San Salvador, said the crash was an accident, but the guerrilla radio Venceromos claimed the helicopter was shot down. The American-made aircraft came down near where a plane crashed last Friday, killing 4 American CIA employees. 3 men have returned to Thursday Island after making the first ocean crossing on sailboards to Papua New Guinea. Peter Briggs of Cairns and Rick Burnup and Kevin Walton, both of Atherton, covered the 100 nautical mile journey from Cape York Peninsula to Papua New Guinea in 12.5 hours sailing time. However, the trip took 4 days, including 1 rest day. The trio was accompanied by marine researcher Ben Kropp aboard the vessel Beaver. Lebanon's president, Mr. Gemayel, has flown to Tripoli for a meeting with Libya's leader, Colonel Gaddafi. Colonel Gaddafi's surprise invitation is seen as a move to mend relations between the two countries.
For Lebanon's President Amin Gemayel, it was a surprise invitation. Libya's leader, Muammar Gaddafi, has a reputation for unpredictable moves. But when he condemned Gemayel last year for signing a troop withdrawal pact with Israel, the idea that the Lebanese leader could come as an honoured guest to Tripoli seemed unimaginable. Since then, however, Lebanon has scrapped the pact with Israel, and criticism of the strong Israeli presence in southern Lebanon has strongly increased. On top of that, Gemayel is coming under increasing pressure from Lebanon's Shiite Muslims, and that's the sort of discomfort Colonel Gaddafi understands. 6 years ago, a top Shiite religious leader disappeared after a visit to Libya, and Lebanon's Shiites have never forgiven Gaddafi. The Libyan leader denies he had anything to do with the disappearance, but as a Sunni Muslim, it means he understands how it feels to be the butt of Shiite anger. But whatever the complex reason, Christian President Gemayel seemed pleased with his warm reception in Sunni Libya.
Striking Perth bakers will return to work tonight, and bread deliveries are expected to be back to normal tomorrow. The stoppage by about 200 members of the Bakers and Pastry Cooks Union began yesterday morning in a dispute over working hours. Caris Bailey reports.
This morning, the strike seems set to continue for the rest of the week, when a mass meeting of bakers rejected a package of proposals from employers. However, the return to work was agreed on this afternoon in a hastily arranged meeting between union and employer representatives. The secretary of the Bakers and Pastry Cooks Union, Mr. Waterston, said the bread manufacturers had dropped their plans to change award payments. A new Friday night shift to bake for the weekend, which would mean a 6-day spread for the bakers, would remain an optional shift only. The employer's proposal to cut night penalty payments and introduce a 38-hour week as a trade-off also had been dropped. Instead, Mr. Waterston said the Bread Manufacturers Association had agreed to introduce the 38-hour week next month, at the same time as it was included in the Bread Carters Award. The strike disrupted bread supplies in the metropolitan area today, but small bakeries and hot bread shops baked as usual. This is Caris Bailey reporting.
The Minister for Cultural Affairs, Mr. Davies, says a departmental inquiry has shown that an instant lotteries grant to an organisation known as the Authors Advisory Service was properly made. Answering a question in the Legislative Assembly, Mr. Davies said the organisation had complied with the conditions of the grant. About $300 of the $1,000 grant had not been used, and there was no evidence the money had been used to pay legal fees. In Parliament last week, a Liberal MP, Mr. Lawrence, alleged that the Minister had made the grant illegally because it had gone to an individual, Miriam Howard-Wright, of the Authors Advisory Service. He also said the grant had not been used for cultural activities, but for legal fees. And finally tonight, a look at the weather. In the lower southwest, scattered showers developing tomorrow. In the eastern Eucla, isolated thundery showers clearing tonight, fine elsewhere. In Perth, fine at first, some showers later tomorrow, southwesterly winds, a forecast maximum of 22 degrees after an overnight minimum of 13 degrees. And that's all from the television newsroom tonight. We'll be back again at 7 o'clock tomorrow night. Good night.